Hello everyone, welcome back to Talk Fluent. We're so happy you're here with us today. If you're trying to make your English sound more natural, confident, and fluent, you've come to the right place. I'm really excited because today's topic surprises almost everyone, even advanced English learners.
Hey everyone, it's great to have you back. You know, when people study English, they often hear, "Don't say that, it's wrong." But here's the funny part, sometimes those so-called mistakes aren't mistakes at all. Native speakers use them every single day.
Exactly, I remember when I was learning another language. I spent so much time worrying about every little grammar rule. Then I realized that real conversations don't always sound like grammar textbooks. That was such a relief, and it completely changed the way I learned.
That's what today's episode is all about. We're going to explore 10 grammar mistakes that are actually 100% correct. These are expressions that many learners avoid because they think they're wrong, but they're accepted in modern English and are used naturally by millions of native speakers.
By the end of this episode, you'll understand why these grammar patterns work, when to use them, and how to sound more like a real English speaker instead of someone who's memorizing grammar rules.
And here's a question for you before we begin. Have you ever been corrected for saying something that later turned out to be correct? We'd love to hear your story. Leave a comment below because your experience might help another learner.
Also, if you're enjoying these English lessons, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Talk Fluent, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. We upload practical lessons designed to help you speak naturally and confidently.
All right, grab your coffee, relax, and let's discover why some of the wrong grammar you've been avoiding is actually completely correct.
Before we jump into the first grammar example, let's remember something important. English has two kinds of grammar. One is the grammar you learn in school. The other is the grammar people actually use every day. Most of the time they're the same, but sometimes real English breaks the old rules.
That's why you'll sometimes hear someone say, "That's bad grammar," even though every native speaker around them says exactly the same thing. Language changes over time, and dictionaries and grammar books change too.
Let's start with our first example. A lot of learners think it's wrong to begin a sentence with and or but. The old school rule says you shouldn't, but modern English says it's perfectly fine. The basic sentence structure is still simple. Subject plus verb plus object, for example. I love coffee. Now add a conjunction at the beginning, and I love tea, but I don't like soda. The sentence is still grammatically correct.
Here are a few examples you'll hear every day, and that's exactly what happened. But I wasn't ready, and then we went home, but honestly I don't agree. And now it's your turn. You'll hear these in conversations, podcasts, movies, interviews, and even newspaper articles.
I use this all the time. Imagine I'm telling my friend about my weekend. I wanted to stay home, but my cousin called. I wasn't planning to shop, and somehow I bought 3 shirts. That's exactly how real conversations sound.
Let me ask you something. If someone says, "But I don't understand," does it sound strange? Probably not. What about, "And that's why I'm here"? That sounds completely natural too.
Here's our second mistake. Ending a sentence with a preposition. Years ago, teachers often said this was incorrect. Today, it's completely acceptable in normal English. For example, who are you talking to? That's natural. Some people think you should say, to whom are you talking? Is it correct? Yes. Does it sound natural in everyday conversation? Not really.
Here are more examples. What are you looking for? Where are you from? Who did you go with? What are you thinking about? Native speakers say these every single day.
Imagine someone asks me, where are you from? If they instead asked, from where are you? I'd probably smile because it sounds very formal, almost like a movie from another century.
Here's another one. Can you answer this question out loud? Who are you waiting for? Say your answer. I'm waiting for my brother. Great. Now another. What are you thinking about? Go ahead and answer. Practice speaking instead of just listening.
Now let's look at another grammar point. Many learners believe hopefully can only describe someone's feelings. Actually, it can introduce an entire sentence. For example, hopefully it'll stop raining. That doesn't mean the rain is hopeful. It means I hope it'll stop raining. This usage is completely accepted in modern English.
Here are a few more examples. Hopefully we'll finish early. Hopefully everyone arrives safely. Hopefully you'll join us again. Simple, natural, very common.
Let's compare positive and negative forms. Positive, hopefully I'll pass the exam. Negative, unfortunately I probably won't. Positive, hopefully she'll call. Negative, sadly she hasn't called yet. Notice how these sentence adverbs help express your attitude.
Can you make your own sentence using hopefully? Pause for just a second and say one out loud. Maybe hopefully I'll improve my English, or hopefully I'll travel next year. Then write your sentence in the comments. We'd love to read it.
Here's another example people worry about, using they for one person. Suppose someone leaves their phone on the table. You don't know if it's a man or a woman. What do you say? Someone forgot their phone. That's completely natural. You don't have to say someone forgot his or her phone. The singular they has become standard English.
Listen to these examples. If anyone calls, tell them I'll call back. Everybody should bring their ID. Someone left their backpack. These sound natural because they avoid unnecessary repetition.
Many learners are surprised by this because they learned older grammar rules. But English changes, and modern usage reflects the way people actually communicate.
Before we finish this section, here's a quick review. Starting sentences with and or but is perfectly fine. Ending sentences with prepositions is natural. Using hopefully at the beginning of a sentence is correct. Using singular they is standard modern English.
Remember, grammar isn't just about memorizing rules. It's also about communicating clearly and naturally. The more real English you hear, the more these patterns will feel completely normal.
Exactly, these aren't sloppy mistakes. They're part of modern English. Keep practicing them in your conversations, and don't forget to tell us in the comments which one surprised you the most. That's it for this section, and next we'll explore even more grammar myths that native speakers break every day.
So now that we've looked at a few grammar rules that are completely acceptable in modern English, let's build on that idea. Here's something interesting. Sometimes English has more than one correct way to say the same thing. One version sounds more formal, and another sounds more conversational. Knowing the difference helps you sound more natural without worrying that you're making a mistake.
That's such an important point. Many learners think there's only one perfect sentence, but that's rarely true. English gives you options, and choosing the right one depends on the situation, the person you're talking to, and even your personality.
Let's look at our fifth grammar myth. Many people believe you should never split an infinitive. An infinitive is simply to plus base verb. For example, to go to eat. To learn, the old rule says you shouldn't put another word between to and the verb.
But you've probably heard sentences like these. I want to really understand this lesson. She decided to carefully explain everything. They hope to fully recover soon. These are completely natural. In fact, forcing the adverb somewhere else sometimes makes the sentence sound awkward.
Compare these two sentences. I want to really improve my English. I want really to improve my English. Which one sounds more natural? The first one, right? That's because native speakers often split the infinitive when it makes the sentence smoother and easier to understand.
Here's another example. Our goal is to completely change the way you think about grammar. You could move completely, but most native speakers wouldn't. The sentence flows better this way.
Now let's imagine a real-life situation. You're talking to a friend after taking an English test. You might say, I'm trying to really focus on speaking instead of memorizing grammar. That sounds relaxed and conversational.
But if you're writing a very formal academic paper, you might choose a different structure. That's the key. It's not about right versus wrong. It's about choosing what sounds best in the situation.
Here's a quick practice. Can you complete this sentence? I want to improve my pronunciation. Would you say really or really to? Most native speakers would naturally say, I want to really improve my pronunciation. Try saying it out loud.
Great job! Speaking aloud helps your brain remember natural English patterns much faster than simply reading them.
Now let's move to grammar myth number 6. Many learners think it's wrong to use because at the beginning of a sentence. Actually, that's not true. The problem isn't starting with because, the problem is writing an incomplete sentence.
Let me show you, because I was tired. That's incomplete. Your listener immediately wonders, and because you were tired, what happened? Now listen to this. Because I was tired, I went to bed early. Perfectly correct.
Here are more examples. Because it was raining, we stayed inside. Because I studied every day, I passed the exam. Because traffic was terrible, I arrived late. Each sentence begins with because, but each one is complete.
Now compare spoken English. Sometimes people answer a question with just one word. Why are you smiling? Because, or why didn't you come? Because I was sick. These short answers are common in conversation, even though they're not complete sentences.
That's one reason English feels so different from textbooks. Real conversations aren't always made of perfect textbook sentences. People naturally shorten ideas because both speakers already understand the context.
Let's compare formal and informal English. Formal, because the weather was unfavorable, the event was postponed. Informal, because it rained, they canceled the event. Both are correct. One simply sounds more conversational.
Here's a little dialogue. I'm hungry. Because you skipped breakfast. See how natural that sounds? You're not thinking about grammar, you're just communicating.
Here's another one. I can't believe you're still awake. Because I had too much coffee. Again, perfectly normal in everyday speech.
Time for a quick practice activity. I'll give you the beginning of a sentence. You finish it aloud, because I wanted to improve my English. Maybe you said, and I started listening to podcasts, or and I practice every day. Excellent. Now another one, because I forgot my umbrella. How would you finish it? There are lots of correct answers.
First tip, don't memorize old grammar myths. Instead, pay attention to how educated native speakers actually communicate. Second tip, listen to podcasts, interviews, and conversations. You'll hear these grammar patterns constantly. Third tip, practice using them in your own speaking. The goal isn't to sound perfect. The goal is to sound natural and confident.
We'd love to hear from you again. Write one sentence in the comments that begins with because. Make sure it's a complete sentence. We'll read through your examples, and it's a great way to practice with learners from around the world.
So let's review what we've learned in this section. Splitting an infinitive isn't automatically wrong. If it makes your sentence sound smoother and clearer, it's often the best choice. And starting a sentence with because is perfectly correct, as long as you finish the thought with a complete sentence. These aren't grammar mistakes at all. They're examples of how modern English works in real conversations. The more you notice them, the more natural your own English will become. And that's exactly the direction we're heading next.
We've already uncovered several grammar myths that turn out to be completely acceptable in modern English. Now let's explore a few more examples that you'll hear almost every day. These are the kinds of expressions that make your English sound natural because they're based on how people actually speak, not just on old classroom rules.
Exactly, and here's something interesting. If you watch American TV shows, listen to podcasts, or chat with native speakers, you'll notice these patterns all the time. Once you recognize them, you'll stop second-guessing yourself and start speaking with much more confidence.
Our seventh grammar myth is about double negatives. This one can be a little tricky because the answer depends on the situation. In standard English, two negatives usually make the sentence incorrect. For example, I don't know nothing. Most English teachers will tell you that's incorrect. The standard version is, I don't know anything. The structure is simple, subject plus helping verb plus not plus main verb plus anything.
But here's the interesting part. In some regional dialects and in many song lyrics, you'll hear double negatives all the time. For example, I ain't got no money. Is it standard grammar? No. Do millions of native speakers still say it? Absolutely. So if you're learning English for work, school, or international communication, it's usually better to use the standard version.
That's a great example of understanding context. Something can be common without being appropriate in every situation. Imagine you're in a job interview, you'd probably say, I don't have any experience in that field, not I don't have no experience. Choosing the standard version helps you sound professional.
But if you're listening to music or watching movies, don't be surprised when characters use double negatives. They're often showing a particular regional accent, culture, or speaking style. Understanding it is important. Using it everywhere isn't.
Now let's move to grammar myth number 8. Many learners think you should never use like as a conjunction. For years, people insisted you should always say as if, but in everyday conversation, native speakers often say, it looks like it's going to rain, sounds like you're having fun, feels like everyone is here. These are completely natural.
Listen to these examples. It seems like she's already left. Looks like we missed the train. Sounds like a great idea. You'll hear these expressions constantly in American English.
Compare the two versions. Formal, it appears as though the meeting has ended. Natural conversation, looks like the meeting's over. Both are correct. One simply sounds much more relaxed.
Here's a short conversation. I'm worried about the weather. Looks like it'll be sunny tomorrow. That sounds friendly and natural. You probably wouldn't stop to think about the grammar at all.
Here's another grammar myth that surprises many learners. Using less instead of fewer. You may have heard this rule, use fewer with things you can count. Use less with things you can't count, for example. Fewer books, less water, that's still the standard guideline.
But here's what happens in real life. You'll see signs that say 10 items or less. Technically, some grammar experts prefer 10 items or fewer. But 10 items or less has become extremely common and most native speakers don't even notice it.
The same thing happens in everyday conversation. I wish I had less emails. Strictly speaking, it should be, I wish I had fewer emails. But many people naturally say less anyway.
If you're taking an English exam, it's a good idea to remember the traditional rule. If you're chatting with friends, don't be surprised if you hear less used with countable nouns. Understanding both versions helps you understand real English.
Let's practice with a few situations. Imagine you're shopping, would you say, I need fewer sugar? No, sugar isn't countable, so you say, I need less sugar. Now imagine you're buying apples. You'd normally say, I need fewer apples. Simple, right?
Here's another practice. Complete these sentences aloud. I'd like noise. The answer is less. Now try this one. There are people here today. The answer is fewer. Great job.
One thing that really helps is listening carefully instead of only memorizing rules. The more authentic English you hear, the easier it becomes to recognize what's standard, what's conversational, and what's simply a matter of style.
Tone matters too. If you're speaking with close friends, your English can sound much more relaxed. If you're giving a presentation at work or writing an important email, you'll probably choose the more standard version. Being fluent isn't just knowing grammar, it's knowing which grammar fits the situation.
Let's do a quick mini practice together. I'll say a situation and you decide which expression sounds more natural. You're looking out the window before going outside. Would you say it appears as though precipitation is likely? Or looks like it's going to rain? Most native speakers would choose the second one in everyday conversation. Here's another. You're talking to your friend after a busy day. Would you say I have received fewer opportunities for relaxation? Or I've had less time to relax? Again, the second version sounds much more natural in casual conversation.
That's the goal we're working toward, not just speaking correctly but speaking comfortably and confidently. So here's today's challenge. Choose one of today's grammar myths and write your own example sentence in the comments. Try using looks like, because, or a split infinitive. The more you practice, the faster these patterns will become part of your everyday English.
Remember, making progress isn't about sounding perfect every single time. It's about communicating clearly, naturally, and confidently. Every conversation you have is another chance to improve.
Let's quickly review this section. Double negatives are common in some dialects but should usually be avoided in standard English. Expressions like looks like are completely natural in everyday conversation. And while fewer is traditionally used with countable nouns, you'll often hear less used in casual English as well. Keep noticing these patterns whenever you watch movies, listen to podcasts, or talk with native speakers. That's how real fluency develops. And in the next section, we'll look at some of the most common grammar mistakes learners make, and more importantly, why they happen.
By now, you've probably noticed something really important. Not every grammar rule you learned years ago still reflects the way English is used today, but here's where many learners get confused. They hear that some mistakes are actually correct, and then they start thinking every grammar rule can be ignored. That's where real mistakes begin.
Exactly. Understanding modern English doesn't mean throwing grammar out the window. It means knowing the difference between accepted modern usage and actual grammatical errors. Let's look at a few mistakes that learners make all the time and learn how to fix them.
I have to admit something. When I first started learning another language, I thought sounding natural meant copying everything I heard. Sometimes I'd repeat expressions without understanding why they worked. The result: I accidentally created sentences that confused people instead of helping them understand me.
We've all been there, so let's start with our first common mistake. Many learners hear native speakers say, "Someone left their keys." Then they try something like, "My brother forgot their wallet." That's incorrect. If you know the person is one male, you would normally say, "My brother forgot his wallet." If you know the person is one female, you'd usually say, "My sister forgot her wallet." Use singular they when the person's gender is unknown, unimportant, or when the person prefers they as their pronoun.
That's the key idea. Singular they isn't a replacement for every pronoun. It's used in specific situations. Understanding when to use it makes your English sound both natural and accurate.
Let's compare them side by side. Incorrect. My teacher said they is coming. Correct. My teacher said they are coming. Or if you're talking about one teacher whose gender you know. My teacher said she is coming. Notice that they always takes the verb are, even when referring to one person.
Here's our second mistake, starting a sentence with because and forgetting to finish it. We've already talked about this, but it's worth repeating because it's incredibly common. Incorrect, because I was busy. That's only part of an idea. Correct. Because I was busy, I couldn't answer your call. Now your listener understands the complete thought.
Here's another pair. Incorrect, because it was cold. Correct, because it was cold, we stayed inside. The word because creates a reason, but the sentence still needs a result. Whenever you use because, ask yourself, what happened because of that? If you can answer that question, your sentence is probably complete.
Here's mistake number 3. Some learners become afraid of using and or but at the beginning of a sentence. Instead, they create long, complicated sentences because they think starting with those words is wrong. But that often makes their English harder to understand. Compare these examples. This restaurant is expensive, but the food is amazing. Simple, clear, natural. Now compare it with this. This restaurant is expensive. However, despite that fact, the quality of the food remains excellent. Is it correct? Yes. Would you say it while chatting with a friend? Probably not.
Sometimes simple English is actually better English. Native speakers don't try to sound like textbooks when they're ordering coffee or talking with friends. They speak naturally. That's exactly what we're trying to help you do.
Here's another mistake that's actually pretty funny. Some learners become so worried about ending a sentence with a preposition that they completely change the word order. Instead of saying, "What are you looking at?" they say, "At what are you looking?" Now, is that grammatically possible? Yes, does it sound like something you'd hear every day? Not really. It sounds extremely formal.
Imagine you're texting your friend, would you write to whom are you speaking? Or would you write who are you talking to? Almost everyone chooses the second one. Grammar should help communication, not make it sound unnatural.
Let's do a quick practice together. I'll read an incorrect sentence. You say the corrected version out loud. Ready? I don't know nothing. The better answer is, I don't know anything. Next one, because I was hungry. How can you finish it? Maybe because I was hungry, I made a sandwich. Excellent. Here's another. My cousin forgot their jacket. If you know your cousin is male, what would you say? My cousin forgot his jacket. Great job.
Let's try one more. Incorrect. At what are you laughing? A more natural version is what are you laughing at? That's the sentence you'll hear most often in everyday conversation.
The good news is that these mistakes are completely normal. Every English learner makes them. In fact, native speakers sometimes make grammar mistakes too. The important thing isn't avoiding every error. It's learning from them and continuing to speak. If you wait until your English is perfect, you'll never feel ready to have a conversation.
Exactly. Fluency grows through practice, not perfection. Every mistake teaches you something new, and every conversation helps you become more confident. Keep speaking, keep listening, and keep noticing how real English is used. That's how you'll continue improving every single day. And now it's time to put everything you've learned into practice with a fun challenge.
Now it's time for one of our favorite parts of every episode. Practice. Don't just listen to us, we want you to join in. For each situation, you'll hear 2 sentences. Your job is to choose the one that sounds more natural or follows modern English usage. Say your answer out loud before we explain it. Ready? Let's do it.
Here's situation number 1. You're talking to a friend about your weekend. Option A, but I decided to stay home. Option B, however, I therefore decided to remain at home. Which one would you probably hear in a normal conversation? The answer is option A. Both sentences are grammatically possible, but option A sounds much more natural in everyday American English.
Great, here's situation number 2. Someone asks you why you missed class. Option A, because I wasn't feeling well, I stayed home. Option B, because I wasn't feeling well. Which one is correct? The answer is option A. Option B leaves your listener waiting for the rest of the idea. Always complete the sentence after because unless you're giving a short conversational reply.
Let's move to situation number 3. You're looking outside and notice dark clouds. Option A looks like it's going to rain. Option B, it appears as though precipitation is likely. Which one sounds more natural when talking with a friend? Definitely option A. Option B isn't wrong, but it sounds much more formal than most everyday conversations.
Situation number 4. Someone left a backpack in the classroom, but you don't know who it belongs to. Option A, someone forgot their backpack. Option B, someone forgot his or her backpack. Both are grammatically correct, but option A is the version you'll hear most often today because singular they is widely accepted in modern English.
Here's situation number 5. Your friend asks what you're searching for. Option A, what are you looking for? Option B, for what are you looking? The answer is option A. Ending the sentence with a preposition sounds completely natural in modern English.
Excellent work. If you got all 5 correct, you're already thinking more like a fluent English speaker. If you missed 1 or 2, don't worry at all. That's exactly why we're practicing together.
Now let's make things a little more interesting. Imagine you're chatting with a coworker. Instead of saying, it appears as though our meeting has concluded, most people would simply say, looks like the meeting's over. Same meaning, different tone. Knowing which version fits the situation is a huge part of becoming fluent.
Here's another example. You're talking with your family about dinner. Would you naturally say, because I was hungry, I made some pasta? Or would you simply say, I was hungry, so I made some pasta? Honestly, both are perfectly fine. English often gives you more than one correct way to express the same idea.
That's why we always encourage you to focus on communication instead of memorizing dozens of tiny rules. Ask yourself one simple question. Does this sound like something a real person would actually say? If the answer is yes, you're probably on the right track.
Let's add one more challenge. Take one of today's grammar points and create your own sentence. Maybe start with and, maybe begin with because, maybe use hopefully, or try a sentence with singular they. Say it out loud first. Then write it in the comments below. We'd love to read your examples, and you'll also inspire other learners who are practicing with you.
One last reminder before we finish today's lesson. Don't be afraid to speak. You don't become fluent by waiting until every sentence is perfect. You become fluent by speaking, making small mistakes, correcting them, and speaking again. Every conversation makes you stronger. Every sentence builds your confidence. And every day you practice brings you one step closer to sounding natural.
Exactly, real conversations are about connecting with people, not winning a grammar competition. Keep listening, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep enjoying the learning process. That's how real fluency happens.
Remember this, clear communication will always matter more than perfect grammar. The more you use English in real life, the more natural these grammar patterns will become. Now let's wrap everything up with the biggest takeaways from today's episode, and leave you with a challenge to use these ideas in your next conversation.
What an amazing lesson we've had today. We covered some grammar rules that surprise almost every English learner, and hopefully you're leaving this episode feeling much more confident. One of the biggest lessons to remember is that English is a living language. It changes over time, and many expressions that people once considered incorrect are now accepted and used naturally by millions of native speakers.
That's exactly right. Instead of being afraid of every grammar rule, focus on understanding how English is actually used in everyday conversations. Today we explored 3 big ideas. First, we learned that several grammar patterns people often call mistakes, like starting a sentence with and or but, ending a sentence with a preposition, using hopefully as a sentence adverb, and using singular they are completely acceptable in modern English. Second, we looked at how context matters. Some expressions sound more formal, while others are better for casual conversations. Third, we talked about genuine grammar mistakes that learners should avoid and how to correct them with confidence.
And remember, don't let the fear of making mistakes stop you from speaking English. Every fluent speaker was once a beginner. Every confident conversation starts with someone who is willing to try, even when they weren't completely sure. That's how progress happens.
Here's something we'd love for you to do after this episode. Choose just one grammar point we talked about today and use it in a real conversation this week. Maybe text a friend, leave a comment online, or practice with a family member. Small steps every day lead to big improvements over time.
We'd also love to hear from you. Which grammar mistake surprised you the most? Was it starting a sentence with but using singular they, splitting an infinitive, or something else? Share your answer in the comments, and if you can, write your own example sentence too. Reading and writing other learners' examples is a fantastic way to improve your English.
And if you enjoyed today's lesson and found it helpful, please support Talk Fluent by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it with a friend who's learning English, and subscribing to the channel. Every like, comment, and share helps us create more practical lessons that make English easier and more enjoyable to learn.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We truly appreciate every single one of you who listens, practices, and continues growing with our community. Keep speaking English every chance you get, stay curious, and don't be afraid to sound natural. Confidence grows one conversation at a time.
We hope today's episode helped you see grammar in a completely new way. Keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, and remember that real fluency comes from communicating, not from chasing perfection. Thanks for listening to Talk Fluent. Take care, keep learning, and see you next time.